What up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Oleksandr Usyk versus Daniel Dubois fight. Now, before I give y'all the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell y'all the results first. Oleksandr Usyk successfully defended his Ring Magazine WBA, WBO, and IBF heavyweight titles via 9th-round TKO. Now, prior to the stoppage, I had this fight score 78-73 in favor of Oleksandr Usyk. That goes to show y'all, based on my personal scorecards, that this was quite a one-sided fight. It was a good performance by Usyk, and Usyk, who's been inactive for over a year, he didn't show any signs of ring rust, and he picked up where he left off at. And to sum up what happened in the fight, Oleksandr Usyk put on quite a clinic, and when this fight first initially got announced, I wasn't looking forward to it because it didn't sound much like a compelling bout on paper, because Usyk, I would say, is a level above a Dubois, and I would say, respectfully speaking, Dubois isn't a top level contender where he is title shot worthy, and it was shown 2 weeks ago in this fight when Usyk outclassed Daniel Dubois in his victory. And as I said, I had this fight score 78-73. The only round that I thought Dubois won was the 4th round and the 5th round. If you wanted to give it to Dubois, I can understand that. However, those 2 rounds was very close, and Oleksandr Usyk did get dropped via a illegal blow, which didn't count as a knockdown, when he got hit below the belt buckle. And there was controversy following this fight because Dubois and his team was complaining about how that was a legal blow, and Oleksandr Usyk and the referee, Oleksandr Usyk, they were saying that he was overacting and he was selling a fake injury to make it look like it was a illegal shot, while the referee had made a mistake of ruling that as a illegal shot, when in fact, from their perspective, it was a legal shot. However, after looking at it, I could see how, watching that fight live, many people could have thought that that was a legal shot and should have counted as a knockout or a knockdown. At least it would have been a knockout if that was considered a legal shot, because Oleksandr Usyk dropped immediately and he did not react well to that shot. However, you look at it, the belt buckle usually is placed right on the belly button, and you look at the replay of that fight and that shot, that punch was below the belt buckle and definitely below the belly button. If it didn't hit the private area of Oleksandr Usyk, then it definitely hit the pelvis area of Oleksandr Usyk, which is a devastating shot. And that's why Usyk didn't react well to it, because it was a powerful shot by a big man, a heavyweight of Daniel Dubois, who's got a reputation of having heavy hands, and a legit shot from any heavyweight at that sensitive area, that pelvis area, would be a devastating blow to any fighter fighting at that weight class. And Oleksandr Usyk took over 5 minutes, well over 5 minutes, for him to recover from that shot. And when he did take that time to recover from that shot, he was right back into action, and he was picking up where he left off at. And Oleksandr Usyk, overall, Oleksandr Usyk was showing that he was a level above Daniel Dubois as a fighter, and he showed that he didn't have any ring rust after being inactive for over a year. And the last time he fought was at this time last year in the rematch versus Anthony Joshua, where he successfully defended for the first time that majority heavyweight title, which he won from Anthony Joshua in their first fight in a one-sided fashion as well. And this was his first defense versus another opponent that isn't Anthony Joshua. And Oleksandr Usyk, he did have, I would say, a right excuse of not finding a worthy opponent to defend his titles against, and as well as what's going on in his country. And the fight that most boxing fans was looking forward to was a mega undisputed heavyweight title fight with Usyk and Tyson Fury. However, both sides couldn't come to an agreement to make that fight happen, and hence why that's why we saw Usyk defend his titles versus Daniel Dubois 2 weeks ago in Poland, and it was a successful show. There was a good amount of people that showed for this fight, and Poland being in the midst of Eastern and Western Europe, being somewhat close to where Usyk is from, Usyk being a Ukrainian fighter, there was a show of support for Oleksandr Usyk, and Dubois is a European fighter as well. He's based out of the UK and Europe, mostly England, because over there they got the most lively local boxing scene. They tend to show more support for local boxing out there, especially for championship fights, whether it be domestic or a major sanctioning body. They always show out more in support and show more enthusiasm and appreciation for the sport of boxing than they do over here in the Americas. Well, not the Americas, I would say the United States of America, because over there in Mexico and the Latin Americas, they show more support for their domestic boxing scene than they do in the US. And this fight wasn't in the UK, this was in Poland. However, Europe, whether it be Germany, Poland, France, outside of England, when it's a major title fight, they always throw a successful show featuring boxing. And it was no different for this fight with Usyk and Dubois. And Usyk, as I said, he displayed good technical skills as always. He showed good ring generalship and that high ring IQ that he always possessed. And he utilized that jab of his, which is a key weapon in his arsenal. He throws that very fast and very slick, and he utilizes angles very well to set up his shots. And he is a very fluid, mobile fighter, and definitely the faster, agile fighter when compared to Dubois. He's faster on his feet. He's got overall speed advantage over Dubois and any other heavyweight fighters that carries more body mass than him, because Oleksandr Usyk did compete at a lighter weight class after he conquered all the titles at cruiserweight after winning the World Boxing Super Series tournament and becoming the undisputed cruiserweight champion. That's when he decided to move up to the heavyweights for a new challenge, and now he accomplished success and is currently the majority heavyweight champion amongst the heavyweights right now. And this was yet another successful title defense. Dubois isn't, I would say, on the same level as a Anthony Joshua, who is still considered a top-level heavyweight contender, and as well as a household name, the biggest heavyweight that is not a champion based out of the UK. And Anthony Joshua, I would say, is more of a tougher opponent than a Daniel Dubois, who is a level above a journeyman. If you are a up and coming talent that is trying to climb amongst the top ranks of the heavyweights, that's a fighter of that caliber would like to get a win against to add to his resume. That's the level that I would consider Daniel Dubois to be on. And this was more of a fight for Oleksandr Usyk to keep himself busy and active. And because that adds to the factor of champions or any top level fighter to be active and not take that much time off, because when you're considered as a high quality fighter, it looks lazy on their behalf when they take more than a year off and doesn't be active as often as they should be, because a year off when you're a majority champion at a notable, important weight class like the heavyweights, it brings a lot of criticism towards that fighter's way. And Oleksandr Usyk, he had to find a replacement opponent that is worthy, that's got some recognition, and him and his team and his promotion ran into the likes of Daniel Dubois. As I said, on paper, when this fight got announced, it looked like a mismatch. Hence why I didn't find a time to make a preview video for this fight. And Oleksandr Usyk, his movement was too fast for Daniel Dubois. Dubois had trouble catching the rhythm and catching the timing and closing that gap with him and Usyk. Usyk did a good job at controlling the distance of the range where the fight was being fought at. And Dubois couldn't telegraph the angles that Usyk was throwing from. Usyk was beating him with the superior hand speed advantage that he had over on Dubois, and he was beating Dubois to every punch. Whenever Dubois would make an attempt to throw a shot, Usyk would beat him to the punch. And Usyk, his next best weapon in his arsenal is that straight left that he follows up behind that fast, sneaky jab of his. And Oleksandr Usyk was finding his target with his shots, and he is very accurate, he is very methodical, and he's built a reputation on those technical skills that he possesses. And Oleksandr Usyk is, I would say, a very high-level fighter when it comes to overall technical skills. And he displayed those factors in this fight very well. And this was yet another impressive performance. And he scored a knockdown at the end of the 8th round. He dropped Dubois. When he caught Dubois with multiple punches, it was a combination of shots. He threw 3 to 4 punches that landed flush on Dubois' head. And he landed a left hook, a left uppercut, a right hook, and that came in flurries, and that caught Dubois off guard, who was already showing signs of fatigue, as the accumulation of shots was starting to wear and take its toll on Dubois. And Dubois, being a heavier fighter carrying more body mass, that tends to tire out a fighter of that stature. And Oleksandr Usyk, being a smart fighter, noticed that and he took advantage of it. And then in the 9th round, he picked up from where he left off at. Dubois still showed signs of fatigue. He didn't have a lot of stamina left in his tank, and he was still recovering from that hurt, from that knockdown, from the end of the 8th round, and he didn't have that desire to want to fight anymore, and he looked wore out, and Usyk was on him, and he dropped him yet again with the power jab, and Dubois got back up on his feet to answer the referee's count. However, when the referee went to take a look at him, Dubois, the lights were there, but nobody was home. And that's what called for the referee to call a halt to the bout. And I thought that was a right call. There wasn't that much of complaints going on the part of Daniel Dubois. And Dubois, he couldn't find his target versus Usyk throughout majority of the fight, which was very frustrating from Dubois and his camp's part. And Dubois, a smart ring IQ that he displayed in this fight was him targeting the body of Oleksandr Usyk. And that came from him not being able to land a headshot versus Oleksandr Usyk, who stayed mobile, agile, and he kept busy with his movements and with his ability to keep his head off of the target with his upper body and head movement, and his maneuvers with setting himself up in different positions with pivots and circling around the ring. That's what gave trouble for Dubois. And whenever he fights his opponents, that movement of his makes it hard for his opponents to land their shots versus Oleksandr Usyk, and the body is more of a bigger target than the head. That's why I thought it was a smart adjustment on the side of Daniel Dubois to go for the body instead of the head, and it would be more of a success to land shots to the body than to the head, because it is, as I said, a bigger target. And strategically speaking, the body shot, it's easier to wear out your opponents with a body shot than a head shot. It's not only easier to land, however, it's more, I would say, takes a toll long-term wise during the fight when you land body shots, because it slows down the movement of your opponent, which was what Daniel Dubois was looking to do versus Oleksandr Usyk, who he had a hard time at catching the rhythm and the movement and the speed of Oleksandr Usyk, and it slows his opponents down if he's able to land those body shots successfully, and that would take a toll, and accumulation of body shots would lower the stamina of his opponent. And there was criticism from many boxing fans after this fight when Dubois looked like he dropped Oleksandr Usyk at that time, considered to many people that was watching that fight as a bad reaction from a body shot, even though it was a illegal shot that landed on Oleksandr Usyk that was below the belt buckle. And that's why Usyk didn't react well to that shot. However, to the body punches that Dubois was landing versus Usyk, Usyk tended to back away and had to regroup to continue his successful performance in this fight versus Daniel Dubois. Now, I would say Usyk didn't react negatively at all to the body shots that was connecting. I thought he received it quite well, and he did what any fighter would and should do, and is to regather his momentum and his breath and readjust and reposition himself to get back on top of his game and to continue to set the pace of the fight and not lose the momentum from a shot landing from his opponent. And That's why I don't understand where this criticism that the fans or boxing critics are picking at Oleksandr Usyk's from. They're looking for flaws in Usyk's game to pick apart at, and he didn't show much of that in this fight. The only moment that people can, I say, point at is where Usyk dropped and didn't react well to a illegal shot that was below the belt buckle. And other than that, Usyk, I thought, fought brilliantly. It wasn't as impressive as the performance that he put on versus Anthony Joshua in the first fight. I thought he fought better in the second fight versus Joshua than this fight 2 weeks ago versus Daniel Dubois. And it's not ring rust because, as I said, he still displayed the same skills that he's been displayed in his prior fights. It's that I don't want to say he didn't train as hard for this fight versus Daniel Dubois than his 2 fights versus Anthony Joshua, which was his last 2 fights that he fought. And Oleksandr Usyk, I would like to see him, futuristically speaking, of him being more active, and that would be a better look for him and would make him more of a legit champion as the current majority champion who holds 4 out of the 5 major titles in the heavyweight division right now. And hopefully it's against a higher level, higher quality opponent than a Daniel Dubois. And as I said, this was a outclassing Oleksandr Usyk. He did say, or his coach said, that for the fight with Tyson Fury to happen next, they would have to have a purse split of a 50-50 for that fight to happen. Now, I think that's quite fair. Tyson Fury is the bigger draw, and he's had more successful events where fans show up more as Tyson Fury as a top draw when compared to Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk had a soccer stadium fight in the UK versus Anthony Joshua. However, that credit for that successful ticket sales has to go for Anthony Joshua more than Oleksandr Usyk. Arguably, Anthony Joshua is still the bigger draw than Oleksandr Usyk. He's more of a marketable name than Oleksandr Usyk. Hence why when it comes to the purse bidding, Tyson Fury has the advantage when it comes to the finances for the 2 fighters' promotional teams to come to terms to make that fight happen. Regardless of the fact that Tyson Fury only holds the WBC belt while Oleksandr Usyk holds all the other titles in the heavyweight division. Usyk has the lineal belt and the WBA, WBO, and IBF titles, and the IBO title as well. And that should be, as far as the purity sake of the sport, Oleksandr Usyk should be the A side. However, when it comes to the finances, Tyson Fury is on the A side when it comes to that, when it comes to being the more marketable name. And they've been trying to come to an agreement when it comes to the negotiating part to make that undisputed heavyweight title fight happen that everyone wants to see. And that's definitely the fight that I like to see immediately happen next. Tyson Fury's got a fight coming up, I think next month, versus former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. It's a boxing match, not a MMA match, and it's going to be in Saudi Arabia. That's more of a spectacle, a exhibition bout than a legit fight, a boxing match. And Francis Ngannou, I think he signed with PFL, and he hasn't fought in MMA since his last fight and that was in the UFC, and he's already departed from the UFC for over a year now. And both Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, this is a money grab for them in Saudi Arabia to put on a show out there with two notable names to fight each other in a boxing match. Then it's a legit fight in both fighters' individual respective careers. And after Tyson Fury has this exhibition spectacle fight versus Francis Ngannou next month, if he doesn't make that fight happen, if him and his promotion doesn't make that fight happen and come to terms with Oleksandr Usyk and his promotional team, then I don't know who Tyson Fury can fight next. And Tyson Fury, he's kept himself busy. He fought Deontay Wilder 3 times. I thought he beat Deontay Wilder all 3 times. The first fight ended in a draw, and then to keep himself active, remember when he fought Deontay Wilder the first time, he came out of retirement after he retired after beating Vladimir Klitschko and becoming majority heavyweight champion. And then he had a good return performance, and he gave up a heck of a fight versus Deontay Wilder in their first bout. And then he kept himself busy by defeating Tom Schwartz via TKO, and then he got a decision victory over Otto Wallin. And Otto Wallin, I would say, has been the toughest fight for Tyson Fury other than Deontay Wilder, because Otto Wallin, if y'all look at Tyson Fury's fight versus Otto Wallin, that fight was more competitive than the second and third fight that Fury had with Deontay Wilder. And then after he cleared all the questions that was left with him and Wilder, he defeated Dillian White and Derek Chisora, which was his last fight. Both fighters that are household names based out of the UK. And that was his 2 comeback fights in the UK. And it was both a successful turnout show, a warm welcome back for Tyson Fury in the UK versus his fellow top countrymen fighters. Now, Dillian White and Derek Chisora are well past their primes, and they're old, and they were old when they fought Tyson Fury and challenged them for his WBC titles. And Tyson Fury stopped them both and put the beats on both Dillian White and Derek Chisora. And that was more of a spectacle for the local UK boxing fans than it was a compelling bout. And Tyson Fury, because he couldn't get this fight and come to an agreement to make that undisputed title fight happen with him and Usyk, which I would say is the only fight left for Tyson Fury to fight other than a fight versus Anthony Joshua, which a lot of boxing fans, not only in the UK, but I would say for all boxing fans, period. I think every boxing fan that are tapped in to the sport of boxing and the public, period, would like to see that fight, and it would be a draw that would bring out the masses to want to catch that fight with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. It would be a spectacle. It would be of a huge magnitude. It would definitely be a sellout show at a soccer stadium easily over there in England. And then there's Andy Ruiz. That would be a good fight to see. And I think those 2 fights would be a win for Tyson Fury. And he would definitely be the favorite to win both of those possible fights if he was to make that fight happen with either Anthony Joshua or Andy Ruiz. And then there's other heavyweights that he hasn't fought yet. Guys like Luis Ortiz, Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce, Zhao Zhang, Philip Hrgovic. I don't know if I pronounced that man's name correct. If I didn't pronounce his name right, pardon me. And there's, who else is there? I don't think there's Jared Anderson, Gerald Miller, Frank Sanchez. Those are unbeaten prospects that's not quite ready to challenge for heavyweight titles yet. They gotta get some more experience under their belt to be considered a contender where they can challenge for any of the heavyweight titles. He hasn't fought Dubois, Tyson Fury. However, these fighters, I would say, isn't a necessary opponents that would be considered a huge fight or a huge challenge for Tyson Fury or Oleksandr Usyk for that matter. And Oleksandr Usyk, I heard through multiple sources that the IBF has demanded for Usyk's next immediate fight to put his IBF heavyweight title on the line versus their top-ranked contender, who is Philip Hrgovic, who's unbeaten professionally and had a decorated amateur career, and as well as him being a technically sound boxer as well. And he doesn't have a lot of experience as a professional. As I said, his experience mostly comes from his amateur career, and his most impressive, notable victory was when he defeated Zhao Zhang via split decision, and that was a close competitive bout. And Zhao Zhang is the interim WBO heavyweight champion when he defeated Joe Joyce in an emphatic, impressive fashion when he stopped Joe Joyce and TKO'd him in a dominant one-sided clinic of a performance. And they got a rematch coming up next month. And if Zhao Zhang is successful versus Joe Joyce and puts on a impactful performance versus Joe Joyce yet again in their rematch like he did in their first fight, then that will make Zhao Zhang a strong candidate to potentially challenge Oleksandr Usyk as Usyk's next immediate opponent to put his titles on the line against. And unlike the IBF, the WBO hasn't put in a request to have Oleksandr Usyk be demanded to put his WBO heavyweight title on the line against their mandatory top-ranked contender. And fortunately for Oleksandr Usyk, he holds more than just the IBF and WBO heavyweight titles. He also has the WBA and the Ring Magazine and the IBO heavyweight titles. That's why he has multiple routes that he can take to choose on who he wants to fight next if that call for bout for the undisputed heavyweight titles isn't immediately next for some time next year with him and Tyson Fury, which is the fight that all fans want to witness. And with that being said, y'all let me know what y'all opinions are from this fight that y'all saw with Usyk and Dubois. Comment y'all opinions in the comment section below, and subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. That does it for this post-fight video. Click the links in the description box below to show y'all support. It'll be very much appreciated. And I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.